So, if you listen to the news about the war in Iran, it'll seem like Iran doesn't trust the US because it is religious, it is irrational, but Iran actually has an incredibly long list of reasons why it doesn't trust the US and European powers. Today I'm going to talk about one of them, a guy named Mohammed Mossadeq, who was a democratically elected Iranian leader who the United States and the British overthrew because they did not like his policies. When they overthrew him and they put a very complacent leader back in power, that leader then began a more than 20-year reign of terror against the Iranian people that included secret police, assassinations, and widespread repression. Hello, I am Christine. I have a PhD in Middle Eastern history. I taught university-level history courses for over a decade, and this is History Klaxon. I feel like I have a big klaxon in my brain that goes off when people need more historical context to understand things happening in the world. So this YouTube channel lets me share some of that information with you. Okay, Mohammed Mossadeq. When people think about Iran today, they think about this repressive religious state. And that's not wrong. This is not a video where I try to argue that the current Iranian state is good, actually. But there is a really clear historical path to how Iran got to where it is today. And a lot of it involved being really messed with by outside powers. So, before the revolution in Iran, which is what led to the state that Iran has now, Iran was ruled by a Shah. Shah is a Persian word for king. So the Shah's name was Mohammad Reza, and his dynasty had only been in power in Iran since about 1925. This was not a king or a royal family that went back hundreds of years that had this incredible lineage. It was a pretty recent invention. It was created by Mohammad Reza Shah's father. So, Mohammad Reza Shah was put on the throne in 1941 by the British and the Soviets. Basically, they didn't think that his father, who had been Shah, was sufficiently loyal to their cause during World War II. And so they put Mohammad Reza Shah on the throne, they forced his father to step down, and then the British occupied all of southern Iran, and the Soviets occupied all of northern Iran. So, Mohammad Reza Shah already had some dubious legitimacy for the Iranian people. Sure, his dad had been the Shah before him, but he'd been put in power by foreign powers during a time when Iran was physically occupied by those powers. So I want you to take a second and think about that. Think about whatever country you live in, how you would feel about a leader who was put in power by another foreign power, while that foreign power literally had its armies stationed across your country, controlling whatever they thought it was necessary to control. You would not like it. And you probably wouldn't think that that leader that they put in power was very good. This would be a fairly rational response to this situation. So, in Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah was not very popular, and there were different political movements organizing against him. The Shah had a fair amount of absolute power, like a king, but there was also a parliament in Iran that, in theory, was supposed to help the Shah make decisions. That parliament, the degree of actual power it has, fluctuates over Iranian history in the 20th century. So Mohammed Mossadeq, the guy that I started the video talking about, he was the leader of a group called the National Front. The National Front was an opposition group that unified secular or non-religious opposition to the Shah. Mossadeq was from a pretty wealthy family. He'd been educated in Europe. He had served in the Iranian government in a lot of different ways. He'd been like a cabinet minister, a provincial governor, a deputy in the Majlis. The Majlis is the Iranian parliament. He had a PhD in law, a reputation for being honest, and was a really strong advocate for parliamentary democracy in Iran. So Mossadeq was elected prime minister in the Majlis in 1951, in part to try and pass a bunch of reforms that would take away power from the Shah and from foreign powers. he did this fairly effectively, and he started to remove powers from the Shah using the Majlis, using this parliament. And so under his leadership, the Majlis introduced a bunch of reforms that the Iranian people had wanted. They passed higher taxes on land. They introduced unemployment payments. They ordered factory owners to pay benefits to workers who were sick or injured. They ended forced peasant labor, which was still a thing happening in Iran in the 50s. Mossadegh helped pass a land reform act that forced landlords to pay a 20% tax on their revenue, the things produced by their land. And by landlords here, we don't mean like people with apartment buildings. We mean people with like agricultural lands that are producing things. So he took 20% of their revenue. He put half of that money in a development fund that would pay for public projects like rural housing. And the other half went directly to sharecropping tenants. So, as a historian, I don't always really love making comparisons between things now and things in the past because they can feel inaccurate. But I also know that that can be helpful to put things into perspective for people who don't know the history as well. So I don't think it would be like totally ridiculous to say that Mossadegh was a bit like a 1950s Zohran Mamdani or Bernie Sanders. He was an incredibly popular reformer who was really trying to make things better for the people of Iran. Most of the people of Iran were pretty poor because almost all of their land and resources were owned by the Shah and other incredibly wealthy elites. So Mossadegh only remains in power for about 2 years because he gets overthrown by a conspiracy led by the United States and the British. They overthrow him because he tried to take back control over Iran's oil resources. And the British, who controlled Iran's oil at this point, did not want to lose this control. So I need to tell you a little bit about how the British got control over Iran's oil. So by the 1950s, when Mossadegh is prime minister, the British, they control all of Iran's oil resources, like directly. They were able to do this because in the 1930s and 40s, the previous Shah of Iran had signed what's called a concession to the British. A concession is kind of like a treaty that gives a foreign power, power over some kind of resource. So in this case, the Shah gave the British government the right to exploit Iran's oil pretty much in perpetuity. In exchange, the Shah got a large cash payment, and there were some other things, but he basically was selling Iranian public resources for his own private gain. And as a lawyer, Mossadegh argued that the Shah did not have a right to do this. He said that as a king and not a popularly elected leader, the Shah had no right to sign away all of the money from Iran's most important natural resource to a foreign power. And again, if you think about this a little bit in the context of like now and your own country, I think you'll see that this would be a pretty persuasive argument. I mean, how would you feel if your country had an unelected king who, in exchange for a payment that went to them personally, signed over all future rights to your country's most important natural resource? I think you'd feel not great about that. So, after getting the rights to Iranian oil, the British created a company called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. This company basically ruled the areas in southern Iran where there was oil. They supplied their own municipal services, they had their own roads and airports, they had their own local sort of police forces. All management of this company was in the hands of foreigners. Iranians could only do like the terrible, gross, hard, dangerous jobs. So the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was not very popular. And so in 1951, Mossadegh helped pass a bill to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. This meant that he wanted the Iranian state to take over the company. He was willing to negotiate with the British. He was willing to pay for like infrastructure that they had built. He was willing to kind of make some kind of deal with them, but he was saying that it was not realistic to expect that they had been able to just buy Iran's oil in perpetuity with a lump sum payment in the 30s. So Mossadeq even sets aside about 25% of the net profits from oil to pay for any legitimate claims made by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. But the British did not want compensation for their losses. They wanted to continue to control Iran's oil. So this led to a fairly bitter struggle, as you might imagine. The British called for an international boycott of Iranian oil and imposed economic sanctions. When they convinced the United States to join the boycott, Iran was plunged into a financial crisis by not being able to sell their oil. This led to the collapse of the Iranian economy. And then in this situation where the Iranians were really struggling over what this was going to come to, and how this was going to be resolved, the United States and the British used spies, paid agitators, and bribes to military leaders to engineer a coup to overthrow Mohammed Mossadeq and put the Shah back firmly in power. Mossadeq got sentenced to 3 years in prison, and then he was kept under house arrest until he died in 1967. Again, using our Bernie Sanders example, imagine that Bernie Sanders got elected president to the United States in 2024, and then he did some stuff that China didn't like. So China paid a bunch of spies and bribed US military leaders to overthrow Sanders and bring back Donald Trump. Or even Biden, if you liked Biden. How would you feel about the person that they had put in power? How would you feel about China? Not fantastic. So Mohammad Reza Shah is back in power in 1953, and he was pretty determined to not let any democratically elected popular leader take his power away ever again. He made any kind of opposition party illegal, and he created a really extensive secret police called the Savak. The Savak was a secret police that was trained by the CIA and Israeli intelligence. Yes, this was a time when the Israelis and the Iranians were friends. It was notorious as one of the cruelest secret police in the world. They had the power to censor the media, to screen all applicants for government jobs, and hunt down anyone they suspected was organizing against the Shah. They had massive prisons, and they were known for torture, assassinations, and disappearing dissidents. They even did a lot of these actions outside of Iran. So even Iranians who fled their country to go to the United States, to England, to France, they also were in danger of being assassinated or, quote unquote, disappeared by the Savak while living on foreign lands. To give you sort of an example of how far their influence reached into Iranian society, in the 60s, the Savak believed that Tehran, the capital of Iran, was a nest of opposition activists. So they started recruiting university students. In the 60s, scholars estimate that every third university student in Tehran was on the payroll of Savak. And even if you weren't being paid, you might have been approached about working for the Savak or informing for the Savak. So I want you to think about how this would have affected just conversations between individuals. In this case, it's in a university setting, but this would have very quickly spread out across Iranian society. You wouldn't have felt that it was safe to even kind of grumble about some policies of the Shah that you didn't like, that you would have feared that anything that you said could have led to you or family members being arrested or worse. The Savak really surveilled all public places in Iran, like restaurants and theaters. Any kind of public gathering was considered illegal because they were trying to prevent any kind of organizing or demonstrations against the Shah. So the Shah kept the parliament, or the Majlis, around during this period, but it was under his complete control. And he does this with the incredible support, financial and military support of the United States. So for the next 25 years, the Shah really holds power over Iran with an iron fist. There is no freedom of speech or assembly. They do continue to have elections for parliament, but everybody knew that these elections were not free, that they were very much controlled by the Shah and his government. And the Shah doesn't do a lot during this time to help the people of Iran. So remember, Mossadegh had all of these policies where he was trying to help, especially the poorest people of Iran. The Shah doesn't really do this. He's more concerned with consolidating his own power. There were some nominal reforms by the Shah, which could be the topic of another video, but he's not doing much to help the Iranians. So these events, Mohammed Mossadegh's takeover of the prime ministership and his nationalization of Iranian oil and his subsequent overthrow by the United States and the British, and the repressive regime that this resulted in, these events are really, really important for Iranian history and how Iranians view the United States. They accurately see us as having helped overthrow a secular, democratic Iranian government to reinstall a Shah who brutally repressed his people, and that we did this because we wanted access to Iranian oil. Most Americans don't know that much about this. A little bit, people learned a little bit about it because there was like a little intro to the movie Argo that talked about Mossadegh. But they're not really aware of this. But these events are really alive in the Iranian popular memory. This is one reason why the Iranians do not much trust the United States and European powers. They are seen as being very willing to like get their hands dirty, interfering in the Iranian state to help themselves and in ways that ultimately are very detrimental to the Iranian people. There are more reasons why the Iranians don't trust the United States and European powers, and I will be making more videos about these things. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like it and share it. Consider subscribing. I'm also open to questions if there are other things you are wondering about Iran or the Middle East in general. Thanks a lot. I'm Christine, and this has been History Klaxon.